Hello everybody, our team will be presenting to you today on the discourse in the South China Sea. Off the coast of China, the Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, Taiwan, Malaysia, and Indonesia lies a few of the world's most crucial and trafficked shipping lanes. These waterways are where the majority of the world's largest exporters' goods are shipped, and if there were any problems at sea, the world economy would be hit the hardest. For a long time, the ownership of the South China Sea has been heavily disputed. China has been slowly building military islands for strategic monitoring of trade and ensuring everything's running smoothly, although some of its neighbors claim that they're being constructed outside of China's own country boundaries. Tensions are slowly rising in the region, and it's only a matter of time before things escalate.
So my first research question is, how has the overall happiness of China and the neighboring countries been affected over time by the disputes? I wanted to look and see if there was a noticeable change in the overall happiness of China and the other countries that we are looking at. So I used data from the World Happiness Report from 2015 to 2022, and I compared the change in happiness score for China, Vietnam, Thailand, Taiwan, Malaysia, and Indonesia. On this slide, you can see a line chart I made of happiness over time from 2015 to 2022 for the 6 countries that I'm looking at from World Happiness Report data. As you can see, there is variation in the overall starting happiness in 2015 for all of the countries, but individually, each country has a relatively stable happiness score. There's not many major changes to happiness that you can see from the chart. The only exception to this would be Malaysia, whose happiness gradually increases from 2015 to 2018 before a dramatic drop from 2018 to 2019, and then from 2019 to 2022, the happiness gradually increases again, so that the 2022 happiness score is actually very close to where the happiness score was in 2015. This could be related to the disputes in the South China Sea, as Malaysia shares a large coastline with the South China Sea. Malaysia was also engaged in a 3-way naval showdown with China and Vietnam beginning in late 2019. So the drop from 2018 to 2019 could potentially be related to the buildup of tensions that led to this conflict beginning at the end of 2019, but it's hard to tell for sure. China has the most overall increase in happiness score. They go from about a 5 to close to a 6. Most other countries stay relatively similar to where they were or decrease a little bit, but China does increase. Overall, looking at the graph, there doesn't seem to be a major effect on happiness score from the disputes. The only real effect that is visible would be the change in Malaysia's happiness score from 2018 to 2019, but there is no way to know for certain that that is due to the disputes or the naval conflict that they were engaged in. The next research question that I was looking at is, how have the disputes affected the economy of China and the neighboring countries, which again are the same countries that I outlined in my last research question: China, Vietnam, Thailand, Taiwan, Malaysia, and Indonesia. So I again am looking at data from the World Happiness Report from 2015 to 2022, and I am comparing the change in GDP over time. I did not include the 2020 and the 2021 data because it was collected as logged GDP rather than just normal GDP, and it was clear that those values were significantly different from the other values in the way that they were calculated. So I did not include that so that it would not throw off the change over time. On this slide, you can see the line chart that I made of GDP over time from 2015 to 2022 for all 6 countries, again excluding the data from 2020 and 2021. So the increase from the 2019 data points to the 2022 data points look dramatic, and that is because of the exclusion of the 2020 and 2021 data. I'm sure it would not look as dramatic if I was able to include that data with the same calculations. But looking at just the lines from 2015 to 2019, most of the lines move in roughly the same way. There are slight changes to the pattern of GDP over time, but most of the countries in the region are moving in very similar patterns. As you can see, all of the countries have a significantly higher GDP in 2022. So even though we don't have the data from 2020 and 2021 in the chart, it is clear that 2022, the GDP has obviously increased. This could be because the disputes in the region are affecting all of the countries in the same way, or it could be that they are not affecting the GDP over time. The fact that China is not significantly different when its economy so heavily relies on the South China Sea leads me to believe that it could be that the disputes are affecting all of the countries in the same way. But based on just this graph, I am not able to tell whether that is true or not. The most recent disputes could also potentially show a more dramatic effect in later years. So as the economy starts to see the effect from the most recent disputes, we will likely see more changes in GDP over time in the coming years, but obviously I do not have that data at this time.
The number of conflicts can generally be used to show how each country has been responding to China's advancements and if it's becoming a more common occurrence. From initial research into the disputes, it's stated that Japan, the US, and the UN have also been policing the sea, which serves as more potential to gain insight into the dynamics of the region. An increase in conflicts could indicate China's starting a more aggressive approach. A decrease could show that tensions are de-escalating and that surrounding countries are starting to regain control. This chart shows the number of South China Sea-related conflicts in the target countries. As displayed by the graph, the majority of the conflicts over the past 3 years have been in the Philippines. While each conflict is unique, one can take away that the conflicts are a result of the Philippines being the closest in geographic location to the Spratly Islands. This is where the majority of intercountry specific conflicts are occurring. The Spratly Islands are the most disputed region of the South China Sea, so it makes sense to have the largest number of disputes there. Military expenditure per country surrounding the SCS can be used to show how likely it is that a country suspects conflicts arising in the near future. Militaries can also be used in civil conflicts, thus data could be skewed for different reasons not pertaining to the South China Sea disputes. An increase in any country could provide evidence of disputes if prior behaviors differed from the country in question. In addition to military expenditure, size of military and also type of military, like naval, could also show preparation efforts. These two charts show military expenditure in totality as well as per capita. Due to the size and population of China, China ranks the highest as of 2021, which has likely continued to present day. This isn't surprising, although between the two charts, it's clear to see that per capita is a better visualization, as it's easier to distinguish the rankings. Due to the localization of the Philippines, it is concerning that they have the second lowest expenditure per capita, while being the closest to the Spratly Islands. As China has a total military expenditure that dwarfs all other surrounding countries in comparison, it's clear if conflict were to arise, it'd be hard for a single country to stand in opposition to their demands or advances.
So my first research question was, what would happen to the marine ecosystems if China fully controlled the South China Sea? I wanted to see how coral reefs and marine organisms were affected by it and how the increase in shipping over the sea would cause a lot of harm to the environment. This next slide shows a chart which basically shows the changes in outer reef areas and inner reef areas as more shipment occur. You can see that between 2014 and 2016, there is major difference in the inner reef, and then there are small changes in outer reef area due to it being in the open ocean, so it's less concentrated and affected by it. And then in the early years, which the environment was more stable, which could be due to less shipment occurring over the sea. But as we get closer to present day, the changes are more frequent. So this next slide has my second research question, which says, what effects does the dispute have on the conservation and sustainability in the region? I wanted to look at how the dispute affected the fishing practices and how warmer sea temperatures drove fish away. To expand on that, the South China Sea dispute has major effects on the conservation and sustainability of the region. As I've mentioned before, if China gained control over the sea, it would cause habitat destruction for marine organisms. Overfishing would also be a result of the dispute. It has led to increased competition for fishery resources, which could also result in unsustainable fishing practices. Increased shipping, oil, and gas drilling could lead to pollution, which would not only harm the marine organisms, but also threats human health and impacts water quality. As well as climate change would also be a result of the South China Sea feud. Due to the fact that South China Sea is vulnerable to climate change, the sea temperatures are rising, which results in ocean acidification and the destruction of coral reefs. This impact not only the biodiversity in the area, but also the food chain. This next slide shows the amount of catches in the South China Sea and Gulf Thailand, the amount of catches of fish. The mean length has declined substantially in the mid-1960s. The lowest level was reached in the mid-1970s. So, in the mid 1960s, as the region's fisheries became increasingly overexploited following rapid expansion of the industrial fishing sector, the lowest level was reached in the mid 1970s for the Gulf of Thailand and mid 1980s for the South China Sea. After which the mean maximum length remained fairly stable, which with slight increases since 2000 in both areas. The loss of large predatory species can affect ecosystem structure, function, and resilience, with resulting socioeconomic and management consequences. Cascading effects wherein the decrease in predator abundance leads to an explosion in their prey population can shift the socioeconomic dynamics of the fishery and also increase variability and instability in the system, thereby posing substantial challenges for fisheries and management.
According to a recent Newsweek article, China's maritime militia has been spotted swarming a Philippine-held island in the South China Sea, raising concerns about China's aggressive actions in these disputed waters. The Philippine military has reported that around 240 Chinese boats, mostly from the maritime militia, have been seen around the Pag-asa Island, highlighting the ongoing tension in the region. China has been increasing its military presence and asserting its territorial claims over most of the South China Sea, despite opposition from other claimants such as the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan. The Spratly Islands, the most disputed region in the area, are located near the Philippines, and this has made it a frequent location of the South China Sea-related conflicts. This incident underscores the need for diplomatic efforts to resolve the territorial disputes in the South China Sea.
In the article, Will the South China Sea Spark the Next Global Conflict?, Richard Haydarian says that although China is set to overtake the United States as the world's largest economy later this decade, the wealth of its average citizen, the strength of its educational institutions, and its overall stockpile of strategic resources are far behind those of its Western rivals. We can see from the line chart of GDP earlier in the slides that China's economy is clearly growing over time, especially when you look at the jump from 2019 to 2022. The economic power of the South China Sea cannot be understated as an important factor in this increase in the GDP. However, it does not seem to be making its way down to the resources that affect the regular citizens of China.
From military expenditure analysis and frequency of conflicts, it's still unclear whether tensions are truly rising. China will likely remain the largest investor in homeland military in the region, and due to the Philippines being closely located in the Spratly Islands, the amount of conflicts will likely remain the same. Data does clearly show that China is a financial powerhouse in the region and cannot be directly challenged by one country individually. If with future data it's shown that a large number of conflicts have been situated in the Philippines, then it could be an accurate assumption that tensions are continuing to rise. Also, if countries show a large jump in military expenditure, then it's also be right to say that they're plotting for opposition to China. The country most pertinent to these disputes is by far the Philippines, and is the best location to get data to gauge whether conflicts are arising or not. While not featured in our analysis, legislation reports could also be good indicators of disruption. Progress in the region could be shown in de-escalation, a decrease in conflicts pertaining to the South China Sea, and lower Chinese military expenditure. All in all, our group found that there were no significant indicators that showed tensions rising in the South China Sea. With more data in a larger time frame, further changes in the data could happen, although the minor incremental changes weren't enough to forecast immediate discourse. The turbulence of the region has shown some amount of change by recent events, and could be more drastic over time. Additional analytical work on more factors could show a difference in outcome. It is wise to keep a close eye on the Spratly Islands and trade disruptions, as the South China Sea is crucial to world infrastructures. To help improve the situation in the South China Sea, collaboration is needed among various stakeholders. This includes governments, international organizations, non-governmental organizations, and other actors with an interest in the region. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations could be a potential partner to work with, given their mandate to promote regional peace, stability, and economic integration. The United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea could also play a critical role in resolving the disputes through its provisioning on maritime jurisdictions and dispute settlement mechanisms. Civil society groups and non-governmental organizations that work on human rights, peace, environmental issues could also be important allies in advocating for peaceful and just resolutions to these disputes. The findings of this report could be presented to policymakers, diplomats, and other relevant actors at the national and international levels. This could also include presenting the report to governments of countries involved in the territorial disputes, as well as to regional organizations such as ASEAN and international organizations such as the UN. The findings could also be disseminated through various media outlets and platforms such as social media to reach a wider audience and increase awareness of the situation. This report highlights the urgent need for a peaceful and just resolution to the territorial disputes in the South China Sea. The call to action is for all stakeholders to work together to find diplomatic solutions to these disputes and respect the rights of all of those who depend on the sea for their livelihoods and well-being. This includes upholding the law, respecting the sovereignty of all states, protecting human rights, and promoting environmental sustainability in the region. Ultimately, the call to action is for all stakeholders to prioritize peace, dialogue, and cooperation, and to avoid any actions that could escalate tensions or lead to conflict in the South China Sea.